Shalom. This is a message to the Israelites, the true Hebrew Israelites, the descendants of the so-called Negro and West Indian peoples, the descendants of the North, Central, and South American Indians. You are the true Israelites. And it's those of you that know this that I have made this message to. We've been divided along the same lines as our slave masters. When we were in the land before 70 AD, we had no Messianic or non-Messianic factions. The schism between the different sects in Israel, the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, the Zealots, these schisms were political schisms. There was no separation of church and state in our land. Our constitution was the Torah, and our spiritual beliefs were in what they call today the Tanakh. So we didn't have any arguments going on in the New Testament because we didn't have one. The New Testament is part of a canonization of books that was decided upon after we were exiled from the land in 70 AD. The Greco-Roman Church decided what books they would put together before we even went into slavery. And they also decided what order to put them in, how to translate them, what these things should mean to the reader. And contrary to popular belief, when we were in slavery, there was no agenda to give us a slave religion to control us. We were controlled by the whip, we were controlled by the iron collar, by rape, by murder and brutalization and intimidation and hopelessness. We were considered cattle and beasts. You can look that up. There's no need to give a beast a religion. You oppress a beast, and the beast learns to obey you through fear. That's if you're an evil master. Everyone doesn't oppress a beast, obviously. The reason I'm bringing this up is because after, by the grace of the Most High and the mercy of the Most High, this country fell into civil war. Opportunities arose for us to escape from our slave masters. And as their house was coming into confusion, we had an opportunity to once and for all be away from them. The Most High allowed a lot of things to happen. Cotton gin was invented, and all manner of greed took place, and less interest in working us in fields came about. More interest in us being domestic servants for hire began to happen. So we began to voluntarily take on religion. And as we did, again, religion and religious theology, that was the province of our slave masters for, gosh, from 70 AD all the way up into the late 1800s when we began to take these things on ourselves. So the entire context in which we got religion from them was not just that we were blind to who we were by identity, but we were also blind to what was going on in these scriptures. We didn't know that society. Even to this day, we don't really know that society the way we should. We don't read these scriptures the way we should. And certainly by the time we go into the New Testament, we're completely twisted in how we deal with these scriptures. I mean, we actually hold now letters that were written back and forth to different churches as scripture. I mean, that's like me writing to one of the congregations that's out here today, and then all of us get tossed into slavery again, and then the foreign invaders that took us take a letter that I wrote to someone about how to act in their congregation and canonize it. And then hundreds of years later, when we got our slavery, they're actually trying to hold a religion based on my letters. That's insanity. And that is exactly what has happened. The situation that I'm reacting to is the slave perception that letters that Paul wrote to his congregations could actually overturn the things that the God of the Israelites wrote and gave to the Israelites, that the prophets of the Israelites wrote and gave to the Israelites, and even that the very Messiah wrote to the Israelites and gave to the Israelites. His whole concept of Messiah doesn't match anything the Messiah said, and it doesn't match anything that he taught his disciples. Like slaves, we got our hands on a book, which is basically the Catholic canon. That's what the book is. We got our hands on it, and like slaves, we want everything in that book to be accurate. Everything. Not a book that we got and put together. A lot of our books are still in the Vatican vault. They won't even release them. They don't want that information to get into anyone's mind, because if we get it, there's no telling how we're going to react to it. What we're going to do is we're going to actually look at what the Most High said to do and establish those things as words that cannot be overturned, because the Most High literally said nothing that he said could be overturned under any circumstance, under any circumstances. And we're going to get scriptures to prove that. We're going to look at the things that he gave to Israel to do in a whole different light, because people look at the laws that the Most High gave through the eyes of these Pauline epistles, which speak very poorly of the law. Basically, it portrays the law as sticks and stones and animal killing, and that the end result of the law is death. And almost as if the Most High made some kind of mistake, and then the Messiah comes along and fixes the mistake. That's the way they make it seem. So that all of that law keeping and suffering for the breaking of the law and all of this was in vain. As if the Most High put together something that eventually had to be overturned because he didn't take into account how messed up we were and how badly we were going to jack ourselves up in it. And these kind of concepts, they don't come from our forefathers. They don't have any record of having these kind of concepts. Everything that comes before these Pauline epistles speaks to the contrary of all of these things. And as you begin to go into the Acts, you're moving toward these epistles. There's actually a conflict going on between the students of the Messiah and Paul. And during that conflict, Paul doesn't assert any of his views. He bows down to their views. It's when he gets out into the different lands of the Hellenistic communities that he begins to realize, hey, I can cut loose these men that the apostles sent with me, and I can do my own thing out here. And that's what he begins to do. And that's what's called slave Christianity. It is the notion that the slave can now do as Paul has done, just basically break away from all authority, begin to do things like say, I love God in my heart. He knows I'm a good person. All of these personal relationships that are established. And in Paul, the authority of men is taken away, which is something that the Most High gave to men. Again, for those of you that simply cannot look at the scriptures in critical terms and say, hey, it's not all one book. It's a compilation of different contributions from different servants of the Most High. Therefore, we have to look at each servant individually, see what they're bringing. For an example, Solomon. Some of the writings of Solomon have nothing to do with holiness whatsoever. Some of his writings are strictly about sex. Now, we already know that Solomon sinned in taking many wives and was corrupted. These teachings on sex that he lays out in there, some of them reflect that excess that he went to. And the Catholic Church canonized this and put this in there. This is nothing that our fathers would have done. Our fathers were very adept at separating the things of the Most High from the common things of man. So we have a responsibility now as former slaves and still in a captivity, still separated from our land, to begin to look at the scriptures with a critical eye and stop taking these visions from our slave masters, because these visions are implanted in us through media from the time we're a child.